what is up guys? So we're going to be talking about the top 5 rogue decks of this particular format. Rogue decks are pretty much decks that can potentially combat the meta. It's just that they don't have enough for them to be considered the top 5 decks, but at the same time they do have the potential. So if you're thinking about choosing a rogue deck to play, then perhaps you can consider one of these 5 options. So the first deck we'll talk about is Altergeist. Now Altergeist lost Multi-Faker down to 1, quite unfortunate, so they do lose a lot of consistency now in being able to actually search out your Multi-Fakers and actually comboing off with her. But that being said, Altergeist is still a relatively strong deck that you could actually use to actually combat the actual meta. And compared to other decks, it is still a very good deck to actually play. Moving on, I also want to talk about Marincess. Marincess will definitely be at least a rogue level deck, so I'd actually like to put it into this particular list. I put it as an honorable mention in the top 5 meta decks list. However, for this particular top 5 rogue decks, I think Marincess can definitely take this particular spot. It definitely deserves a spot as a rogue deck because a lot of people have already shown that Marincess can definitely do a lot of crazy things based on Yugioh Pro testing and everything like that. So when it comes out, I think it will definitely be at the rogue level. Now, speaking of honorable mentions, I also wanted to talk about True Dracos. It was an honorable mention for the top 5 meta decks, however it just didn't make the cut. However, I do think that it deserves to be one of the rogue decks here, simply because it can do so much. It can respond to a lot of things. None of them were hit during the ban list, so because of that, they are definitely one of the top 5 rogue decks that you could actually take out to contend against the meta decks. Now, this next deck is going to be very controversial, and that is Orcusts. Now, Orcusts actually took a very massive hit. You might think Rusty Bardich is just one card, but overall, with Rusty Bardich gone, you kind of lose out on the Phantom Knights engine, because is it really worth playing the Phantom Knights engine anymore? Because if you can't go into Rusty Bardich, what are you going to really do? So because of that, Orcusts are pretty much in this particular position where they are actually struggling to come up with something that they can actually do. Can you actually still make really insane combos? Of course. Orcusts are all still at 3, so they can definitely make a lot of big plays. However, I just think that cards such as DD Crow can easily just hinder a lot of these combos. It's just depending on how they actually incorporate it with other small engines. Perhaps Orcus can actually make a good comeback and become one of the top 5 meta decks again. However, I think at this point it's safe to say that they can definitely take the spot here as one of the top 5 rogue decks. Now, before I talk about the final deck, I actually do want to make a few honorable mentions on certain decks that are actually potentially good enough, but just doesn't make the cut for a rogue deck. So I actually want to talk about Madolches. Madolches, they actually did pretty well. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of tournament reports where Madolches actually played. Very surprising, but of course, they definitely can have a bit of potential here to actually join the rogue decks as well, but it's just barely making the cut for me. Likewise, I also want to talk about Cyber Dragons. They can definitely OTK quite a lot. They can easily go into Mega Fleet. I'm actually quite annoyed by the fact that one Cyber Dragon can easily just get rid of my extra monster zone, so it's kind of unfortunate there, but as you can see, they definitely have that potential, but they only get an honorable mention in this particular list. We also have Magical Musketeers. Magical Musketeers have recently got Max, so definitely very nice for them, but overall, until we actually see something impactful, I don't think they deserve to actually be on the top 5 rogue decks, but I do think that they deserve a mention, as they could be one of those decks that can actually just come out of nowhere and just, you know, take over any of these current decks we're talking about. But of course, the final rogue deck I'd actually like to bring up here is Infernoids. Infernoids now have 3 Monster Gates. It's really insane. I think Infernoids, it's always been that deck that I just can't beat. I always have trouble taking on Infernoids. No matter what kind of deck I use, I always lose to them, and you know, I was tempted to actually put them up as one of the top 5 meta decks, but I do know that a lot of you guys don't struggle as much as I do against Infernoids. It's just that for me, Infernoids are one of those decks that are incredibly difficult, and now that they have 3 Monster Gate, they have become very strong to actually go up against the meta here, so they definitely deserve a spot as one of those rogue decks. So that's pretty much it for the top 5 rogue decks here, but one thing I would like to mention, because I do think a lot of you guys might actually be quite bothered by this, is that why didn't I mention Pendulum Magicians? Well, the simple thing is, just like Infernoids, in my personal experience, I never lose to Pendulum Magicians. I don't really think that they're that strong of a deck, simply for the fact that my side deck has never actually changed in, I don't know, in a long time. But the cards I always played for 3 years now in my side deck is Dimensional Barrier, Cosmic Cyclone, and Twin Twisters. I always have those cards in my deck, in my side deck that is, and because of that, Pendulum Magicians is a deck that I never really lose at. Now, I do understand that Pendulum Magicians are very strong. I will definitely be able to lose to them in Game 1. However, if we're talking about Game 2 and Game 3, where we actually have to consider those as well in major tournaments, I really doubt that Pendulum Magicians will be a very big impact, simply for the fact that a Dimensional Barrier can easily just shut down the entire deck and they really just can't do anything anymore. But if you guys actually do feel that they actually are worth it, then, you know, feel free to play it. This is all my opinion. You know, I just always can't beat Infernoids, but I can always beat Pendulum Magicians. It's just how I experience things right now, and because of that, that's how I'm going to put them here on the list. I'm putting Pendulum Magicians as an honorable mention, whereas Infernoids, they deserve to be one of the top 5 rogue decks. But that's pretty much it for the top 5 rogue decks of this particular format, so I hope you guys actually enjoyed this video. Definitely leave your own opinions down below as well. I'd like to see your own top 5 lists. But in the meantime, I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you next time.